this. I've had a committee hearing in the state of Maryland to deal with federal contracting, and I anticipate in this Congress we're going to follow through on this more. We know that there are problems with federal agencies that are supposed to make contracts available to small businesses. There's a law that requires them to do it. Some agencies are better than others. The SBA is there to be your advocate in regards to making sure the agencies make these funds available in a fair way. Now, one of the problems that we find is that agencies tend to bundle contracts into larger contracts dealing with larger companies that they're familiar with. Well, in this legislation, we started to take action against that. We don't want to see the bundling. We want to see contract officers receive training and have some comfort to reach out and go beyond their existing contractors in order to bring in more smaller companies and minority companies. So the legislation starts to deal with those types of issues to break down contracts. We also want to see more prime contracts with small companies, rather than having to rely upon being a subcontractor. And we also are concerned about the abuses between prime contractors and subcontractors. All those issues are dealt with in the Small Business Jobs Bill. One or two more points I just really want to put on the table so you're all familiar with it. The Congress did repeal the 1099 requirement. I can't tell you how many of you have contacted me, but if this is a typical group, about 2/3 of you have called me at least 5 times to let me know that that would be a terrible thing for these reporting requirements. Well, we repealed it. So that is now done. Don't worry about it. We told you it was not going to take effect. It won't take effect. We also, in Maryland, were fortunate enough to get the Recovery Fund money to get statewide broadband. Now that's going to help our state, because that means you can do business in any part of Maryland with broadband. We've connected all the homes, all the businesses, and Maryland's the only state that was able to take recovery funds and use it statewide. So we now help our particularly rural communities, but it helps all of us, particularly smaller companies who otherwise would not have access to that type of service. I want to mention a couple points about the Affordable Care Act that was enacted, because we paid special attention to small business in regards to that legislation. If this meeting would have been held 5 years ago, we'd be talking more about the availability of affordable health care to small businesses. Today, the number one issue, as I said before, is access to capital. But in the Affordable Care Act, we took great attention to make health care much more affordable for small employers to cover their employees. There's a tax credit that's currently available that can help you afford insurance for your employees. In addition, and starting in a couple years, there will be these exchanges that will be available that will bring down the cost of insurance for smaller companies comparable to the cost of larger companies. Right now, small companies pay about 20% more for the same coverage. That will be eliminated as we move into the exchanges. And one last point, because we are mindful of putting additional requirements on small companies. If you have less than 30 employees, there's no new requirements as far as coverage or contributing to the cost of your employees under the Affordable Care Act. We are currently working on the SBIR bill dealing with innovation and research. That bill is currently on the floor of the United States Senate. I think it now has the record of a bill being on the floor for the longest time of any bill. It's been there for the last 2 to 3 months. It seems that way anyway. The bill is an important bill. It is a long-term reauthorization of the source for innovative funds for small companies. We know innovation is critically important. Maryland, particularly a high-tech state where we rely on high-tech jobs, the SBIR program is very important for our biotech industry, for the high-tech fields, for communication, energy. All those areas, the SBIR program has been very effective. This provides long-term predictability. The good news, it's bipartisan, and we expect that we will, if we can get it to a vote, we'll get a strong bipartisan support for its passage. The pending amendment on the bill is my amendment that would increase permanently the surety bond limits for small construction companies. It becomes very difficult for them to be able to get government contracts because of the surety bond requirements. the surety bond requirements. If you don't have federal participation, the banks at times require the same security that you need in order to make get your credit. This bill increases the surety bond limits, making it easier for construction companies to be able to get the surety bonds necessary for government procurement work. We increased it during the Recovery Act. It increased significantly activity among small construction companies, and there was not a single dollar lost to the federal taxpayer. So, I must say, I am optimistic that we are going to see our economy recover the way that it needs to, because we're going to pay attention to the needs of small businesses.